Good morning. It's Friday, March 3rd. Wow, the year's going by fast. So for this pre-recorded, it's going to be a little tough with the lighting. I'm going to show you a technique, other side, Vanna, a technique that is direct to paper with an ink pad. So I have this cute little birthday card with the seashells for anyone who likes the beach, or for those of us up here in the Northern Hemisphere who are longing for some beach time. And then I have this other one where we're going to use the small Stampin' Spots, and I created kind of like a little tablecloth. So those are what I'm going to show you today. This is a pre-recorded video, so welcome. I am Donna Goodwin. I'm with Winged Horse Designs. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator located in Brookings, South Dakota. So I am going to switch cameras, and we're going to get started on these two cards. Okay, let's start with this one first. So what I did is I'm going to show you that just by dragging your ink pad, you can get direct to ink. Now I chose two really light colors just to start us out with. And this one is Fresh Freesia and this one is Tahitian Tide. And then I decided, since those were kind of pretty colors for the beach, especially the Tahitian Tide, that I'd bring in the Friends Are Like Seashells. We're going to use this little seashell here, this little piece of seagrass here, and then I chose the sentiment, Happy Birthday to my beautiful friend, and on the inside it says, friends are like seashells you collect along the way. So that's card number 1. What you will need for this card, and the measurements are in the description. I started with a card base that measures 4 1/4 inches by 11 inches, folded in half at 5 1/2 inches. You could certainly do the other type. Okay, we have a problem here. You could certainly do the other way, where you fold it on this side and open it this way, but I thought it'd be fun to have a tent fold. You're going to need 2 pieces of a neutral color. I'm using basic white. These measure 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. You can see that this is not 4 by 5 1/4, but I find it easier to work on a piece that is larger than what you're going to need. I have a piece of Tahitian Tide that measures 2 7/8 inch by 5 inches. And then I have another piece for my label that measures 1 inch by 3 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and set this one up in the corner. And we're going to start creating our background. So I'm going to bring in some scratch paper to protect my desk surface. And what we're going to do is we're just going to drag our ink pad. So these Stampin' Up's ink pads are kind of flat to the edge, so there's no raised edge on the outside. This one is the closest to the edge of the case, so this is the one we're going to use, and I'm just going to drag it in a swirl. And you can see a little bit of it there, and you can just keep going till you get it as dark as you want. And I'm perfectly okay with these little pieces here because that kind of gives it a little bit more of a look. And then I'm going to bring in the Tahitian Tide and do the same thing on the other side. Now, to make it easier for me, I'm going to flip it over here. Okay, that one got a little bit darker. I put too much pressure on, but that's okay because we have another side. And we'll just do this again. So you want to start out light, because you can always add more color. And of course you could do stripes. You can go one direction, then another direction and create a plaid. There's just so many different things you can do with this. But I thought it might be fun to create kind of an ocean wave. Or a lake wave, depending on where you live. And I think that, well, maybe just a little bit lower here. There we go. Oh, I like that. So I'm going to close up Fresh Freesia. I'm going to leave the Tahitian Tide open because I need it later. So now we can cut this down to this size here. The hard part is deciding, do I want this side or this side? And I think I'm going to go with this side. So I'm I'm going to trim this down to 2 3/4 inches. You could save that for something else if you like. And then I'm going to trim it down to 5 inches. But if you liked the inside and you didn't like either side, you could easily just trim off a little bit from either side. But as you can see, it's just easier to have a piece that's bigger for dragging, and then you can work from there. So let's set this aside and do the rest of our stamping. You'll need some scraps. Mine fell to the floor here. You'll need some scraps for your seashells. So I'm going to take this seashell and I'm going to stamp it in Tahitian Tide. I've already done the other shells in the seagrass. There's 2 ways you can cut this seashell out. Now you can see it's pretty easy to fussy cut, but if you stamped a whole bunch of the different seashells and you wanted to cut them out, the die does a lot of different pieces and it creates one big piece that you can use as a background piece. So if you're just using, I would trim it in a little bit tighter, but if you're just using one, you can line it up on the one, tape it down, run it through your die cutting machine, and then you'll have a little bit of trimming to do. And I have one here to show you what I'm talking about. You have just a little bit of trimming yet to do. So you can do it this way, especially if you had all of those to do. You could get them all cut out at once with just a little bit of trimming to do on them if you want to use them individually the way I am. This set has a matching embossing folder as well, so if you wanted even more texture, you could stamp them and again line them up into the embossing folder and emboss it and have even more texture, but I chose to leave them flat. Then I'm going to clean this because we're going to use this shell again. We're going to bring back the piece that we made, close up our Tahitian Tide, and with Starry Sky, I'm going to stamp some seashells directly on the bottom, right onto this piece. And I'm being totally random about it. And then we'll put these other pieces on top of it. So I'm going to set that aside, bring in our banner, and stamp. Actually, I'm going to punch first. I'm using the banner's punch, and you can punch 3 different sizes, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and 1 inch in 2 different styles. And just silate it all the way in. It's sitting in that track. I'm just checking to make sure I have it straight here. And now I'll stamp this. Because I'm going to get kind of close to this flag side. And then if this is a little longer than you like, you can trim that. But let's go ahead and stamp the inside as well, and then we'll come back. Because I think I do want to trim that down a bit. So I'm going to stamp the inside. And here's what I've done to the inside. So friends are like seashells we collect along the way. We're going to clean this again. I should have done the inside before while I still had Tahitian Tide on it. But that's okay. I like playing with my chamois and cleaning. So we'll bring Tahitian Tide back. We'll bring in soft sea foam. And I'm going to stamp some seagrass in soft seafoam. I'm actually going to stamp off so that it's really light. And I'm going to tip it around a bit so that all the curves aren't necessarily in the same direction. And then I'm going to come in with Tahitian Tide, and I'm going to stamp off once for one shell. You see that? I almost put it in the green. And then I'm going to add another shell that's darker. Now that we have all of our stamping done, I'm going to go ahead and glue this piece to the inside. Now I'm not actually going to glue this one down because I cut this wrong. And so with the front, I'm just going to tack things down for you, and then I'll come back and fix a different card base. So I'm going to glue this one down flat onto my mat. So as we're looking at this backside where it got really dark, if you would like it dark, just put more pressure down. And I'm just going to tack it since I need a different card base. I'm going to put this on the left side. And for I think I want to trim about 1/4 inch off of this. No, I like that better. I'm going to put some adhesive on the back of it, quite a bit of adhesive actually, that we can attach our thread to. And I'm not sure how much thread it is. I just wrap it around my fingers about 3 times. And I'm just going to let it kind of do its thing here. And I think we'll twist this one. And then I'm going to stick my label down on top of it and pick it up. And then I'll anchor this down with dimensionals. So I'll put the dimensionals right over the threads to anchor them and hold them in place. And then I'll put some on the edges where we would want them to be. And you notice I didn't go to a great deal of trouble to make the thread necessarily do what I want it to do as much as letting it do what it wants to do. But you can certainly manipulate it to make it go any direction you want. So I'll set this down here. Bring in some of the seagrass and glue it down. Glue these 2 down flat. Put this one down with some dimensionals. Bring in a couple seashells. Also put down with dimensionals. And then bring in some of the flat pearls. They kind of look like sea oysters when they're flat like this. So there's card number 1 by just dragging your ink pad across the paper. There's a lot of different ways to do this. I'm just showing 2. So the second card, I brought in these stamping spots. You get these with your paper, with a paper pumpkin if you're a paper pumpkin subscriber, and each paper pumpkin comes with a different color. And then you can also buy the uninked ones if you want a color that you have not yet gotten in a paper pumpkin. So I haven't gotten crumb cake yet, so I made my own. And I'm going to do red and crumb cake, and I'm just going to come straight down this time. So again, I'm still going to use a piece larger than what I need. And this time, since I kind of want a grid, I'm going to lay this on my grid paper and tack it down so that I can use this. And I need something to help me guide my spots. And I have this plastic sheet, and I'm just going to lay this plastic sheet. I want only half when I first start out. So I'm going to take that plastic sheet, and that allows me to snug right up to the plastic sheet and come straight down. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the crumb cake. And you do have to kind of look to kind of see, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm just going to alternate it back and forth, kind of like a red and white checkered tablecloth that you might find in a pizzeria or a beer garden. But I chose crumb cake so that we could have a little bit more color. Then I'm going to move it up. These little spots are about 1 inch square, and I'm going to alternate my colors. And I can see that my red spot probably needs to be re-inked. That's another reason why you keep grid paper on your desk to protect it. And I'm going to come in another inch and alternate the colors again. I'm going to go ahead and do another row, even though I'm probably going to cut that row off, but then I can play around with it a bit. And now I have a checkered pattern, kind of like a tablecloth. Depends on what you're doing with your card. That I can now trim down to use on the front of my card. So I'm kind of happy with this edge. I just need to trim these edges and the top. So I'm going to trim this edge here in about where this edge is here. And then I'm going to trim this one in a little bit more. And I think I did, looks like I did about 3 5/8 on the other card. So we'll come in about to here. Well, let's go out a little bit further. Let's go to 3 3/4. And so now I've got, I don't really have a white edge there, but I think I only want to come up about 3. So I'm just going to bring this in to right about where it is there, and I'm going to trim that off. Now you can easily do the whole piece, and then you'd have 2 pieces to work with. But for the sake of the demonstration, I'm going to stop just part way up. So I can add this to the front of my card. So this time, and again, these measurements are in there as well. I'm using a standard portrait card, so it measures 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches, scored at 4 1/4. I had two pieces of white that measure 4 by 5 1/4. One we worked with there. So here's our inside. And then I've pre-done my little beer glasses. And I stamped and cut them out. I guess I should tell you what stamp set everything we're using. I'm using the Brewed for You stamp set. It's got the beer mug, the beer glass, a heavy type of wine. I'm not a beer drinker, but a heavy glass here, and then like a bottle of beer. And I chose Another Round for Your Birthday for the front, and we're going to put I owe you one or several on the inside. And then it comes with some matching dies, and I used these two dies here with the glass to cut these out. So I stamped and cut out one glass in crushed curry, and then I stamped again and I put in my bubbles. But this particular die, this one here, will cut out the outside edge, and it'll cut this piece off here. I throw away the top, but it gives you these little bubbles coming up through it. So it's kind of hard to see it here in the camera. Oh, there we go. But you have bubbles on this side. So I thought it would be fun to have some of that extra texture. So I went ahead and did those ahead of time. And I'm going to glue those to their glasses. I did try to layer the two pieces together and cut at the same time. But because this layer with the bubbles cuts it out, I ended up with a frame on this one. And so I chose to cut them separately. I chose to use this one here and then use a stamp and use this one on the other one. When you layer these two together, because this, flip it over here, it'd be more interesting. Because this piece cuts as well on the outside edge, I ended up with this little frame, and that wasn't what I wanted. So I did stamp multiple times to create this effect. So we have our two glasses. Let's go ahead and stamp our happy birthday and stamp our inside. Again, I'm going to punch this ahead of time. And this one also measures 1 by 3. Well, I didn't get that one punched very well. That's why I like to push it around on the back and make sure I have them lined up a little bit better. Oh, that's much better. And I'm going to go the same direction again. I'm going to bring in crushed curry. I like the crushed curry when you're dealing with the beer. It kind of has that same color to it. And we're going to stamp Another Round for Your Birthday. And we're going to trim that here in a bit, but let's go ahead and do the inside of our card. We'll just say, well, let's do the glass first. So I'm going to ink up the glass, and I'm going to put a glass down here. Then I'm going to ink up the inside of the glass. I've got to put some beer in this glass, or ale, or whatever you're drinking. And I want to stamp off, so I'll just bring in this scrap and stamp off. I don't want it to be quite as dark as the detail behind it. And then, of course, some bubbles. And now we'll do our sentiment. Because instead of putting the sentiment at the top, I thought it would be fun to put the sentiment kind of down in the middle for a change. You could also put it down here and then right on the top if you wanted to. We can put this on the inside of our card. So if you do not have a demonstrator and you live in the United States, I'd love to be your demonstrator. I do a monthly host code that you can add in each month. Each month the host code changes. This is my March host code. And there's a couple different places that you can find me as well. You can find me at my website, which is wingedhorsedesigns.com. You can find me on Facebook, wingedhorsedesigns.com. You can find me on YouTube, wingedhorsedesigns.com. I do not have a banner for you for Instagram, but I'm also over there on wingedhorsedesigns.com, or Winged Horse Designs, sorry. Also, if you're enjoying this video, I would love it if you would give me some thumbs up or hearts, comments, or share the video with friends of your crafty friends you think might like this. I'm going to put my beer glasses on with dimensionals. And I'm going to kind of tip them just a little bit so that we're cheers. And then I felt that this was kind of bland, being just white. So first I'm going to trim off that 1/4 of an inch we were talking about. We being me, myself, and the mouse in my pocket. So I thought it was just a little bit on the stark side. So I'm going to take my crumb cake spot and I'm just going to drag it over the edges and kind of give it a little bit of a rustic look. Depending on how far in you come determines how much of it you have. There we go. I got a little bit further in there. That just gives it a little bit more of a rustic look. And I'm going to put this on with dimensionals. I'm not going to do gems on this card, so that if I want to send it to a gentleman, it doesn't have any of that bling on it. It has a little bit more of a masculine look to it. Now, if I decide to send it to a lady for her birthday, then I'll add some gems into it. So there you have 2 different cards. This one dragging your ink pad over it. This one taking the smaller ink pads and just applying them directly to the paper. There's several different techniques that you can do this. So please just experiment with it. You can drag it. You can work it straight down. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. You can work it in geometric patterns. Lots of different things you can do. You can do it in, you can drag and make stripes. You can drag in arcs and make rainbows. Lots and lots of different ways to do direct from your ink pad to your paper without the use of stamps. To make pretty background papers, we don't necessarily always have to buy pretty papers. We can make our own pretty papers. So I hope you enjoyed this short little, about roughly 30 minutes of direct, it's called direct to paper ink technique. So thank you for watching, and I hope you do come back. Happy trails, everyone.